as regards authority and power, I mean, this is really what the crux of the issue is for me. And Sotiris made a very interesting and important point, which is, can we actually have a science beyond scientism? So the way I look at it is that
could somebody perhaps introduce a definition of scientism? I can do so if nobody else is willing.
I will, and Sotiris can, or the two of you can come back and give your own if you disagree. So for me, scientism is fundamentally, it's a metaphysical conception of science. It's a conception of science. And then this is the thing, Sotiris, you're talking about religious thinkers not parachuting into their time. This is very much true of science and the scientific revolution. I mean, think about Descartes. Okay, Descartes and Bacon, and Francis Bacon, two of the greatest innovators and revolutionaries in the scientific revolution, both intensely religious Christian men who intertwined Christianity and theology into their writings. And so for me, that's what scientism is basically. It's looking at science rather than, like I was saying, this communal enterprise of reshaping the way we think about ourselves. So we see the pale blue dot, we see ourselves as one species among millions. That changes the way we think about ourselves, how we want to relate to each other, our animals, our environment, and also a project of empowering humans to achieve our purposes. So it's a project of human agency. For me, that's you could think about that as the alternative to scientism. Scientism sees science as having a special method called the scientific method, the hypothetical deductive method or abduction or whatever. This allows us to obtain true knowledge of the world as it really is, either directly, like in naive realism, or as an incremental process, like we're slowly wiping the fog away from the window. This is, to me, scientism. And why should we care? I'll just say one last thing.
And everything else is epiphenomenal at some level.
Yes. Well, what I was going to say, why should we care about this is, this has huge political implications, okay? And this is why we should care, because otherwise it's all just abstract table talk, okay? Why does this matter? It's because, like dogmatic theology, if you believe that you have the answer, okay, the truth, whether it's about the purpose of human society or whatever it is, some policy issue, that you can look up in the back of the textbook, as it were, well, then why do you need to talk to anybody? Why do you have to have dialogue? Democracy becomes pointless. And we can see this, for example, today with neoclassical economics ruling policy. You can see that in the Catholic Church ruling over Ireland. You can see that in the Soviet Union with official dialectical materialism and official Marxism.
And Mao, China under Mao as well.
Yes, exactly. When you have the answer from an indubitable source that's beyond controversy, based on this essentialist distinction between opinion and fact. Okay, opinion is what the masses have and their emotions and the vagaries of themselves and so on. Fact is what we have through our special method. That's very, very dangerous. And this is, for me, the intellectual root of authoritarianism. I'll leave it there.
I just want to very briefly make the point that in this sense, scientism is almost being used as a subcategory of technocracy, as a particular type of rule by experts, in this case, scientific experts, which might suggest that in some ways a theocracy is the original form of technocracy, with the original experts being the religious, in ancient Babylon or Sumer or what have you. And interestingly, an algocracy, a rule with algorithms or by automated processes, is not quite the same thing. And that's a very interesting emergent property of political and social systems today, like YouTube and social media with their automatic flagging and stuff. It's not, an algorithm is not an expert or a person. But nonetheless, Sotiris, would you like to come in on those points?
Well, many issues have been brought up: occultism, the scientific method, scientism, authority, etc. So, few brief points on all of them. First of all, well, a working definition of scientism, as I have invoked it now, implying or explicitly proclaiming implications of scientific data that are not necessarily dictated by said data. As you can see, this is a working definition concocted now for the purposes of our discussion, implying or explicitly proclaiming implications of scientific data that are not necessarily dictated by said data. as you can see, the issue is a very thorny one, because practically any theory that is not, only, for example, Einstein's famous formula on energy and mass obviously isn't scientism, because this is a scientific formula of a physical equation. Okay, but science is not only equations. And we also do science in order to understand the world, which, however, entails that you will, to some extent, have some scientism. You want to devise a theory based on scientific data in order to understand the world. But this theory, to the extent that it's not only equations, will also, implications that are not necessarily dictated by the data will creep in. I'm fascinated by intellectual history, because there you can see how one thing leads to another, etc., etc. So Bernard Lightman's, who is a historian of science, work on 19th century England, is an academic at the University of New York in Canada. Bernard Lightman's work on this is fascinating, how a number of ideas were crystallized in the 19th century and gave way to conceptualizations that were not necessarily the only way to go. By the way, we mentioned the scientific method, but it is a given in the history and philosophy of science that there is no such thing in the singular. There is no the scientific method, which is the same for all sciences, etc., or science in the singular. This thing simply does not exist. Of course, there are scientific methods over and against non-scientific methods. Please do tell.
Is there perhaps, Sotiris, an emergent scientific method arising gradually as a result of consensus between different scientific methods, in a way which is importantly distinctive from the perennial themes which religions hold in common? It's constructed in a different way.
The trap lies in the second one, in the second part of the sentence. The question, all these little things, like, okay, there is no one scientific method, but there are scientific methods. What's the difference? Why is this important, etc.? It's because it relates to the edifice, the conceptual edifice, which also is power dictated, that then leads us, trapped in concepts that are not accurate, to devise models, etc., like this one, the scientific method over and against the religious method. There is no religious method. There is hardly anything that can be said of religions that apply to them all and does not apply to non-religions.
Revelation and emanation are often held up as being the foundational epistemological distinction between sciences and the religious domain.
I don't think that is the case. For example, Christian doctrine, Eastern Christian doctrine for that matter, was worked on, and refined, etc., because new challenges arose in the span of 8 or 9 centuries in ecumenical councils, etc., because new challenges emerged. So the witness of the church as to where the border between what can be allowed in the church and what cannot be allowed in the church, outside of the church, doctrinally had to be somehow defined due to new challenges. So that's how you have the doctrinal apparatus, for example, of the Orthodox Church. This is just an example. What I mean is that in comparison to this, the idea that religious doctrine is something that falls from the sky out of revelation, etc., is a caricature of that historical reality.